You're listening to episode 30 of Post Production Podcast. Hello and welcome, all you amazing people out there, to the Post Production Podcast. Thank you for joining us as we talk about the latest in movie, TV, and trailers. I'm your host, Mr. Drew, and here with me, of course, is our co-host, Adam.
Yes, once again, I am here. How's it going, Drew?
Pretty swell, Mr. Adam.
Oh, yes. What are we doing today?
Today, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yes, and I was so blown away by it, but we'll get into it. So yeah, 50 years, and it still holds up. Like, for the most part, it is still a solid movie. And if you haven't seen it, like me, definitely go watch it, because it is definitely a kind of landmark in the cinematic history. I think it's one of those movies that you kind of need to see, and I've always heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everyone's kind of heard about it. If they haven't seen it, at least they've heard about it, because it's just so influential. And literally every movie, every space movie has taken some sort of influence from 2001.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a movie that holds up. I mean, even after 50 years. Yeah, there's some parts that are obviously dated, you know, the hairstyles, the dress, the speech,
exactly.
What we were talking about. But there's so very few movies like this out there. Even today, 50 years later, there's very few movies out there that were produced, directed, shot, displayed, cast. I mean, everything about this movie provokes a response, and not a specific response.
Yeah.
You know? And I got to give it to Kubrick, because, I mean, even 50 years ago, this is a long shot kind of gamble in a cinema where, you know, people go to do specific things. They either want to go to a drama and they want to laugh, or they want to cry, they want a thriller, they want a horror, they want action. Yeah. And then that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And this is a movie that you go to and you walk out, and pretty much most everyone is scratching their head at one point or another, because it doesn't give you anything specific.
It doesn't give you a specific answer.
Yeah.
And it's not a specific response. It's not a specific experience. If it evokes some emotional response out of you, like, it's done its job.
Right.
And I think that's the main kind of thing that Kubrick wants, and he succeeds. I mean, for the most part. I mean, if you watch this movie and you're just like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think you really have to be invested in it, because easily you could turn off. Like, in the first 5 minutes, you could just be like, yeah, I don't feel like watching this. And I understand that, but if you're down and if you're into it, I think it really pays off. I feel like you'll feel differently when you come out of the movie. Right. Yeah. And I love the way it's paced.
Well, I mean, 50 years ago, I mean, a lot of the movies didn't have, I mean, the breakneck pace that the movies of today have. But even for this movie, which is it's like 2.5 hours.
It's 2.5 hours.
Yeah, long. But there's only 40 minutes of total dialogue in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of just visualization. It's a lot of music. It's a lot of things to provoke a visual and an emotional response. And I mean, even the opening scene, I think probably 99% of any director or any screenplay would have taken that scene and condensed it down to probably like 2 minutes.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have worked.
And it wouldn't have worked.
Because even though there's literally no I think there's no dialogue until 25 minutes in. For 25 minutes, there is no dialogue, and that is amazing to me. And that opening scene, you know, with the primates, in, you know, basically the birth of man, it is so fascinating. And at first you're a little confused, but it all just makes sense. And then by the end, you're just like, that was essential. I think you had to kind of see that to see where things were going. And no, I loved it. Just the idea of this whole thing. People have been saying this for 50 years, but he was ahead of his time in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, the way he sets up this film and the kind of, I guess, break points within the film, he challenges a lot of different things: creation, God, religion, the evolution of man, and then the continued evolution of man.
Yeah.
It's brilliant the way it's shot, and I think for a lot of people, they just missed the boat on it.
Yeah.
Because I think for most people that went into this, probably originally went into this movie, they kind of walked away, and they were just like, I don't get it.
Yeah. But I think the visuals are so stunning that, I mean, I couldn't take my eyes away from it. And again, like, it's 1968, like all the space stuff looks really incredible. And like you said, 40 minutes of dialogue, and it's because the visuals and the music they're so important to the actual film and the impact of the film. It's not until the HAL computer that you get a lot of dialogue and stuff like that. Talking about, where we are today with AI and the world, and how we're trying to create these technology to become smarter and to anticipate our needs. In 1968, that was such a clear kind of thing, that a clear direction that we were going. And now that we're here, we're basically one step away from a HAL computer. And how are we going to handle that?
The biggest fear and the biggest question when coming, I think we've addressed this on a couple of other podcasts, when it comes to AI, and the biggest fear for everyone is that, if you get a computer that gets to the point where it's smart enough to identify its place in society and the universe, and then it recognizes our place in society and the universe, and then it comes to that realization that humanity as a species is a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's counterproductive. It's a cancer, so, I mean, not only self-preservation, but I mean, preservation of everything else as a whole. The elimination of man is an instant conclusion.
Yeah.
And not only that, the protection of itself. So, even 50 years ago, that question was kind of put to the test.
Yeah.
And, those scenarios were observed.
And I think another thing that you brought up is the evolution of man, and something we don't really consider, in modern times, is there are all these studies and, all the scientific evidence of evolution, how we evolved from apes, but is this our final form, or do we still have, more to go? What's our evolution from here, thousands of years in the future? So, that's something that we don't really consider. So is there a higher kind of, just a higher state of being human that we get to evolve to, and how do we get there? And something with the whole AI and technology is, why are we trying to create this other form of life in AI when we're not fully evolved as a species yet? And I think that's one major thing is, when AI realizes that, we're not perfect ourselves, they can easily overtake us. I think it's a really scary thought, and the fact that it was still relevant 50 years ago, I mean, it just shows that, we probably should be worried about that if we've been thinking about it for 50 years.
I think longer than that, but we are just advancing at an exponential rate, but two ways, population and technology. So, we're always striving for something that's going to make our lives faster, easier, and more
convenient.
More convenient because we're lazy.
Exactly.
But anywho, going through this movie, through the different stages, it starts out, we've got these primates, this early man, and you can definitely see the transition between, one group being stronger than the other group.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this black monolith appears.
Yeah.
And, it's scary, it's intimidating. They don't know what it is. It doesn't do anything. It just kind of sits there.
Yeah.
But then you kind of see this realization as they get close to it, and then they start to handle it. Nothing really happens. But then the next scene, you see this transition of the thought, the creative process of, hey,
what if I do this?
What if I use this tool?
Yeah.
And now I have this tool that
can protect me, and
that can protect me, but enhances me.
Yeah.
As a species, as a ape or human or whatever.
And that's that birth of man. That's that step into evolution, where that differentiates apes from man, is that thinking process.
It's interesting how the movie sets up these different stages of evolution. The first one kind of transitioned man from primate into a thinking machine, able to create tools, and then that pushes everything from that point. And then, someone or whoever, puts another one on the moon, which is the next sort of, I guess, stepping stone in evolution. It's like, okay, yes, you've become the master of your own planet, and now you have the ability to leave your own planet. Yeah. And, so then, we find and a transmission kind of gets sent out from that monolith on the moon towards Jupiter, which is the next kind of challenge. It's like, okay, now that you can leave, your planet, let's see how far you can go. Let's see if you can get to the next step. And I thought it was really interesting how, that scene played out on the moon, because you almost have the same kind of makeup of scene. You have the scene with the primates, and they're all gathered around the monolith, and then that's an integral kind of stepping stone. And then again on the moon, you've got a group of human beings gathered around the monolith, and then it triggers the next kind of step. And I was just like, this is brilliant.
And, as soon as I saw that, the parallels began to kind of form, and it really shows, like, even though we've come this far, we're just still those primates looking for the next step in evolution. So I thought that was really, really well done.
It impressed me because I've heard kind of notes from I'm going to butcher his name again, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
And he's talked about 2001: Space Odyssey, about all the things that they got right.
Yeah, and
as far as space and travel and all the different things that has to do with, anything regarding space. And watching the movie, I was just kind of like ticking the boxes, the rotation of the ship to create gravity.
Yeah.
Them eating, like, in the beginning when he's kind of on this, when one of the doctors is on this kind of, I guess, Pan Am kind of cruiser flight, he's eating everything out of like straw boxes and things like that. I giggled when I saw the stewardess walking, and and it specifically shoots to her feet, and it says grip shoes.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's amazing.
But that was one of those. It was one of the opening scenes with actual humans, and still there was no dialogue yet. And I thought that was just such a clever way of just explaining that instantly without saying anything. Again, 50 years later.
And I love how it kept with this kind of this visual kind of narrative as well. Instead of her having like these big clunky magnetic boots, which is probably what every other person would have done, because everyone would have said, well, you need a way to stick to the floor, and the only way to do that is like magnetic boots. But she's just wearing these very subtle, they almost look like little leather kind of pullover shoes,
almost like hospital socks.
Yeah, like hospital socks, grip shoes. And I'm like, brilliant.
Yeah, great.
But I thought it was really interesting, the subtle way that Kubrick, because I think the main focus of this film is this middle scene where it's Bowman and I don't remember his co-pilot. It's these two on the ship with Hal. and this interaction with this AI computer. And the evolution of this whole act, where you don't really get a clear understanding of why Hal is doing what he is doing.
Yeah.
You sort of get the sense of, he's reading their lips because they're talking about turning him off, and now has this kind of self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to protect himself. But throughout this whole thing, it goes finally all the way to the end where Bowman actually has to turn Hal off.
Yeah.
And you just kind of think, oh, okay, yeah, he kind of defeated the villain in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple way to think about it. But then when you really delve into a little bit more of, I would say, one interpretation of this scene is that, man's gone through all these different evolutionary changes. One of them being the requirement and the need to rely on artificial intelligence and mechanical things to get him through the next stage. When at the end of this journey, he actually removes it. He turns it off and able to kind of continue.
The significance of that whole scene is in taking that next step in evolution. It's, the next step in evolution isn't AI. It's, the fact that he has to turn it off. That's what really puts him over the edge and lets him continue on that journey of evolution, which I thought was really interesting, because everyone would say that AI is that next step, but this is, I love how this movie showcases that is the direction that you would think, but it's actually in realizing that we don't actually need it is what really progresses us into that next stage, which I thought was a really interesting thought.
Well, I can't name any specifics, but I mean, in my experience as far as TV and movies and shows that I've watched, there's been a couple of interesting kind of showcases where there's been an evolution, and the next evolution, it goes from, man, the industrial age, the coal age, the mechanical age, and then we get into the computer age. We transition into the AI age, and then from AI, we transition into where our interaction with our environment, with our materials, with our living space, with the things that drive our lives, transitions back into a biological interaction. Yeah, it's almost a full circle kind of thing.
That's crazy.
But anyhow, yeah.
No, but going back to like just the influence of this movie, and the fact that I've seen so many movies leading up to this, where this was really the beginning, because just going back to like Alien, like the original Alien, so many parallels with that, even Ex Machina, we're going to continue to see that. I mean, it really set the standard for, the idea of artificial intelligence in movies, and also space, because, I mean, even Interstellar, especially with that last sequence when he's going through space, and you just see these crazy, trippy visuals. I was like, Interstellar, like, took that right out of this movie. Do you think that people knew that this was going to be just this crazy pop culture thing back in 1968?
I'm not really sure. I mean, because when you think of Kubrick films, I mean, pretty much a lot of the things that he's done has kind of pushed those kind of boundaries between visual and emotional responses and things like that. Now, I don't know where this lies in his lineup of movies as far as, where people are going to go into this and expect, this isn't just going to be some space action film. This is going to be something that's going to bake my noodle a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think with a lot of people, this isn't for your average moviegoer, because they're gonna sit down on this. They're gonna watch it. Either they're gonna walk out because they're like, I can't do this, or at the end of it, they're just gonna be like, I really have no idea what I saw, and I just wasted 2.5 hours of my life. Where other people are gonna walk away and each one of them's going to have a response from it. They're
Yeah.
all going to see something in there, and this is only based on their environment, how they were raised,
Yeah.
what their principles are, what their values are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether they're religious, whether they're, you know, they're anti-religious, whether they're into technology, or, you know, everything's going to elicit a different response from them, which there are not that many movies out there that have ever been made like this.
You know, with this movie, it's so open-ended for you to kind of interpret. I think that's probably something that probably pissed people off, is the fact that they sat through this 2.5-hour movie of just all music and visuals, and then at the very end you don't even get a cookie cutter kind of ending to it. I could see how that would kind of piss people off, but I thought it was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, I almost wish I could go back. I'm sure there's somewhere buried in YouTube or wherever, but to see how they marketed this movie, like
Yeah.
what trailers they put out at that time, because I guarantee, or, you know, I pretty much imagine that it was all just the space part.
Yeah.
It's like that they're like, oh yeah, it's Kubrick's doing this space opera, this kind of space movie, cool. And then you sit down in this movie and you're going, what's with the monkeys? I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. And why is this so long?
What's funny is, like, going into this movie, like, because I've seen, like, there's a bunch of YouTube videos that reference 2001, and they always put the shot of the ape smashing the bone, and I never understood that.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what's this have to do with 2001? But the first time I saw that and knew that it was a 2001 reference, in that instance, I knew that this was a different movie. And then from then, I just have been putting it off. So I'm glad that I finally saw it.
Yeah. I mean, even when I rewatched it, I completely didn't remember the first and last act of this movie. The
Yeah.
only thing that stuck with me, and probably because I watched it when I was so young,
Yeah.
the only thing that's going to make an impression on me is the space part. You
Yeah.
know, with the fun, cool space stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
The follow up movie to this one, actually 2010, the year we make contact, is, which I rewatched after watching 2001, is the one that I completely remember more from my childhood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Should I see that one?
I think you should, because it takes it another step.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not as visually and emotionally, kind of put together like 2001,
Yeah.
but it still kind of, it transitions the movie in a way where if you wanted some specific answers, it gives you those specific answers.
Okay. Okay. That works. All right. I think that is about it. Any final thoughts on 2001?
No, I would just say, for a 50-year anniversary movie, for something that's been out there that long, if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor. Give your noodle a little baking time. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Pop it in the oven, enjoy some cookies.
I would say the same, just because it's resonated with so many people on so many different levels, and that you get to see that even today, that it's really fun to go back and see where it all kind of started.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, 50 years later, and I mean, this is going to hold up for 50 more years. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, this will always be in a specific category on its own when it comes to the cinema arts.
Yeah, this is classic cinema at its very best. So that's it for this week. Next week we got something. I don't know what.
I have no idea.
We'll see.
Because Solo comes out.
Oh wait, I think Deadpool comes out this week.
Is it Deadpool? It's Deadpool then Solo. Yeah.
Deadpool and then
Solo's looking better and better.
Yeah, this is gonna be just a fun movie to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for it. And yeah, Deadpool is not this week. It's next week.
It's next week. Yeah, it's next week, and then Solo's the week after.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I'll probably just see Infinity War again. But no, we'll do something special for you guys. So we will see you next week. Thank you guys so much for listening. Goodbye.
Have a great day, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for listening to Post Production Podcast. If you'd like to reach the show, you can email us any questions or comments at postproductionpod@gmail.com.
You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All those links are in the description below.
And if you like this podcast, hit that subscribe button and let us know by leaving a rating and review on iTunes. We really appreciate it. See you guys next time.